So my name is Robert Ellen. I'm Identity and Access Management Specialist for Unity Technology Solutions. Just a little bit about us and in Unity. So Unity Technology Solutions, so we are based in Dublin. We have offices in Cork. So essentially what we do is we bring an integrated approach to IT service delivery. And that means that we have a couple of different strands of service. A lot of the stuff that Glenn mentioned in the introduction as well is around our cloud capability. So around cloud services and Office 365 migrations, training, and managing Office 365 in large environments. And around infrastructure, just generic infrastructure systems that you have on premise, and data center operations. We've a large part around security. Security is kind of a large part of everything that we do. Again, that's why the identity and access management is a large component of this. So we also do a managed service, so we can actually take your end-to-end end-user calls and do a full managed service for that. We also do contract resourcing, so a lot of our customers have contractors that are part of our staff members that are in their businesses every day, helping them with their business needs. And we have a unified communications as well around Skype for Business in the cloud on-premise integration. So we have a large practice around identity and access management in education, and our education customers have been great for us because, again, as Bredeen brought up, the complexity of identity and access management in education is absolutely enormous. So we look to partner with other companies that can help us around these identity challenges. And we found one such partner in the UK in a company called HEAnet. And HEAnet essentially is the largest Azure deployment in Europe. So essentially, it's a cloud-first identity platform. So one of the things that gets me when I come to identity management, and gets me personally as well, is that everywhere we go that we're putting in identity management solutions, we bring you a lot of infrastructure. So if there's a point solution we put in, you need a lot of databases, you need an awful lot of servers, you need an awful lot of experts on the ground to be able to manage those. And that's even outside of the challenge of actually going to have an identity and access management project. So we found with HEAnet is that their scale of being cloud-first identity management solution fitted very much in our philosophy of identity management. And there's just a few figures here as well. They're deployed in over 44 countries. They've about 4 million, it's actually a lot more users now. And there's about 120 million authentications every week. So it's a good cloud scale service. They were Microsoft's Partner of the Year 2015 in public sector and education. That's a global partner. So Microsoft recognized their work in that space and how they bring additional benefits to education. And just a couple of their customers and some of our customers as well. A notable customer that was on the HEAnet platform for a long period of time is Dundalk Institute of Technology. So we've actually did some work with them around migration to the cloud as well. And we did an awful lot of work in consolidation with HEAnet and the Royal Irish Academy of Music, because they had a very, very specific requirement in that they had multiple directories, they had a group of different cloud vendor applications, and they also had a challenge in that they wanted to give people long-term alumni services. And what does that bring to them? So I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of how I see where identity management fits in. And this is more kind of around the things that we often see in talks around the fundamentals of modern IT. And the fundamentals of modern IT are very simple, and we've seen them build up over the years. And I'm very happy actually to have been part of a time when cloud was just being mentioned and cloud was just a thing. It was this nebulous thing. And now it's become a huge enabler in education. Nearly everywhere you go, there is some type of cloud discussion. But we've really moved on from kind of the fundamentals, and kind of when I grew up with computers, to me computing was a command prompt. It was C:\\, wait for input. We've moved on quite a bit from that. And generally that was devices, and then at the time that I grew up with computers, they didn't have internet access. They lived in rural Ireland, you know, libraries was as close to a knowledge base as you ever get. Then we take a look at identity and access as an enabler. So over the years, we've seen the growth of cloud services, not just services that we know, the big services, but there's consumer services that we consume from day to day. And they actually all are built around identity and access. They know who people are, they know who their customer base is, and they get them signed into services that way. But the enablement around identity and access is to the great goal, which is cloud services. the more stuff you move to the cloud and you take the SLAs around that, the better it makes your organization perform. Because as educators, there's certain things that you don't want to be doing as educators, like virtual learning environments. You don't want to be hosting a virtual learning environment. If you're primarily in education, you want to offset that to another vendor. So that's an example of where a cloud service really comes to help. We've all seen, some of you were at the talk at UCC talking about their move to Office 365 as well. I mean, that's a great enabler as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you move to the cloud, and suddenly all the tools of the cloud become great enablers. But always in the middle of this, there's always this whole concept of the identity and access management component. Because we have to kind of talk about traditional access. So everybody's kind of very, very familiar with this diagram. So you have your network, where all of your servers and services are inside your network. You have the magic, which is sort of the cloud before the cloud, which is the DMZ. And this is where an awful lot of the interconnectivity happens into your organization. So people come in over mobile devices, PCs, browsers, and apps. So then we go, well, that's great, we're going to get rid of our DMZ and we're going to go to the cloud. It's going to be absolutely awesome. But in fact, there's kind of a separate reality that sets in very quickly when you do that, and you take a look at all the other SaaS application vendors and providers. And the truth of the matter is that people end up having multiple identities. Some people have stuff that's deployed already that they're already using. And there's also the whole thing that mobile is becoming a big deal. And as more people evaluate services, as the prices go down a lot of these services, you might want to change vendors. So you might want to move from one CRM provider to another. You might want to move from one VLE to another VLE. Well, an awful lot of that then involves building new interconnections between those pieces. So then when we think of that and we begin to think of what that means for identity, identity becomes almost like your firewall. Identity becomes the new control plane. So your organization needs a really good identity service to connect to a cloud services or cloud services that you'll do in future. But even go beyond that. So say you start developing a new service, so you bring in a vendor, and what do you hold the vendor accountable for in terms of identity and access management? So there's a few things that you can hold us all accountable for in identity and access management. So user provisioning is very important. And when we looked at this cloud-first model as well, we said, when we were working with Cloud, we said, okay, well, cloud user provisioning, I mean, what does that really mean? Well, the truth of the matter is that your users sometimes exist in other places. So they can exist in core, banner, in databases, in text files, in Active Directory. So what we're able to do is we're able to take any of those user data sources and we sync them through the cloud service, and we use that then as a central repository, and we can make decisions on actual where those users are provisioned to. So we become a central repository for these. So we also talk about deprovisioning, and I'm going to bring up something a little bit later about what truly is deprovisioning, because we have a tendency to keep an awful lot of user information lying around when that user is left. So I've worked in deployments of Forefront Identity Manager, and we have a very typical kind of rule when we do that, where we say, oh, listen, the user is gone, they're gone for a while, the change of registration status, they're gone for 6 months, we're going to delete them out of Active Directory. I've always had a sort of philosophical problem with that, because that's actually a very, very valuable piece of information. So I think deprovisioning needs to be very, very carefully thought out. But also when you go to Office 365, for example, there's other things you need to think of in deprovisioning, and that's user retention of data. And so, for example, with the provisioning piece with Cloud, when a user comes in and they go to Office 365, we give them a license. So we automatically license them. We say, okay, you're a student member, you're a staff member, you get a license. But there's something people don't consider when they move to the cloud, is that deprovisioning is important as well. So when that user leaves the institution, so you retire somebody and you remove them from the directory, Office 365 will delete their data, and in 30 days their data is gone forever. So what you need to do is you need to turn on retention. You need to activate a whole pile of workflow around that. So we can cater for that workflow as well. So it's just all of those additional considerations when you go to the cloud. So essentially in this piece, we become the identity provider. So the user signs in through our IDP. So typically the IDP could be a mix of your Active Directory plus some other technologies. But because the user's synced into Cloud, we become your IDP in the cloud. There's some benefits to that as well, because when you're accessing cloud services and you're relying on any components of on-premise infrastructure that may exist, if you have an incident in your data center, nobody can sign into your cloud applications. The issue there is if nobody signs into your cloud applications, you put yourself into a situation where remediation of whatever effort you're trying to do to fix your current problem is quite tricky. So by having an identity provider that is entirely in the cloud is an easy way of taking care of this issue. And we do some other clever stuff as well, because passwords are hell for everybody, and they are absolutely hell everywhere. So one of the easiest ways of actually getting people to deal with passwords is to get user self-service password reset. So what we do is we have workflows in the cloud that enables a user to first register for password reset. They can register via, they can do a Q&A, alternate email address. You could choose to do SMS. So for SMS, we can get you an SMS gateway, an API provider, or we can use any SMS gateways you already have. But we can also use other third-party second-factor authentication code generators. So they'd be able, so if somebody was using Azure Authenticator or Google Authenticator with their other accounts, they can just use that on this service as well. So when they go, oh, I forgot my password, they go to reset.eurinstitute.ie and they enter in their credentials at reset. So we'll reset that password in the cloud. We'll become the storage for that, but we will write that password back on-premise as well. So when they walk into the building, they go to access a computer, they can sign in with the same password. Then we have a little bit of a think about user life cycles for students and staff. I don't know, is the guy in the white shirt blocking the white on the alumni? Over on the right-hand side is alumni. So when we talk about different types of student and staff, I mean, we go through a whole user life cycle from prospective to applicant to postgrad to alumni. And all of those are very, very important stages in a user's life. Typically, sometimes we see these diagrams as a line, sometimes like a circle. Really, they are literally a circle. So when we take a look at our cloud-first identity with IamCloud, what we can do is we can do a lot of clever things around that identity. So for prospective students, we can actually capture digital data on open day. So say, for example, students need to be provisioned into applicant systems. So we can do some intervention in that. So we can get a certain amount of self-service user account activation in place. So we can provision those students then into Active Directory and into other applications using API access or SQL access to that. And then for those students then as well, if they're a returning postgrad, we can actually re-grant them access to services. Because typically a student leaves for a period of time, and then they'll come back in maybe a year, take a year out, come back and do a master's. Maybe they're doing a repeat exam, repeating a year, or maybe something else has happened that has caused them to have a gap in their time. So any deprovisioning methods that have taken place, we can actually reverse those and re-provision them to on-premise resources while still retaining their cloud account. And then when they become alumni, and again coming back to the whole provisioning, deprovisioning kind of scenario, one of the things that we can do, because we're in a cloud-first model, we can actually remove the students from your internal directories, but we can retain them for alumni services. And one of the ways we do that is through a clever technology that's in the platform called Touchpoint. And the easiest way kind of to visualize Touchpoint is kind of like these places where you're trying to get into the train, that you have a card in your hand, which is sort of kind of what you know about the user, and you go to swipe, but you have to pause at that, notice something, and pass through. So we see the login process as an actual, it's actually a couple of different steps, and it's an entire workflow. So with the Touchpoint framework, what we're able to do is we're able to interrupt that workflow and do something with the user. So for example, simple things like accepting the institute's end-user license agreement. So, and in a lot of places where you sign into computers, you see the pop-up box. By clicking OK, you've accepted the institute's piece. And that's a perfectly valid way of doing that policy. When you go to a cloud-first model, you kind of got this thing where you're signing into stuff, but you have to go to websites and portals to see things. So during a user sign-in, we're able to put a form up saying, by clicking OK, you accept the end-user license agreement or the IT services agreement for the institution. We can also collect information. So if there's missing information that we need to know about a student or a staff member, we can ask them, say, for example, an SMS password reset registration or multi-factor authentication piece, it's like, hi, we want to collect a number from you so that we can contact you later, or you can self-serve these capabilities. We can also do this before sign-in. So for example, if a student is returning to a portal, you could take a subset of students, and as they type in their email address, you can conduct this quick student survey. And you could take that data from the student survey and then just allow them to proceed to sign in. So that's kind of a bit about touchpoint framework. So what you're doing is you're adding additional benefits to the end user experience by using the identity as the control plane for that experience. Another piece as well that we're taking a look at IAM Cloud for that has worked out really well for us is around cloud storage. And I sort of kind of have to pause for a second and just have a little bit about how cloud storage currently works, especially in Office 365. So every person gets a terabyte of OneDrive storage. It's a load of storage. They get a terabyte of SharePoint, and then you get additional storage for every user you add to SharePoint. In multi-user environments, though, there's a complexity, and it's not just for Office 365 and OneDrive. It's for other cloud services as well that use storage, and that's synchronization. Synchronization is a kind of an interesting effort in itself, and it's fine for the likes of me who's carrying around my 512 gig Surface Pro because it's a nice, fast, beefy computer. But the truth of the matter is, if I go into a shared services environment where I have a shared computer system, or I've got a computer that doesn't have as much storage as in the cloud, I can have problems with synchronization. So somebody can go to a computer, they could start writing their thesis, they can close down the computer and it hasn't synced to the cloud. They forget what computer they've gone back to. So with the Cloud Drive Mapper, we can actually map a drive on your computer like a traditional Windows drive mapping into cloud service. And because we have the identity of the user, we can enumerate what services they have, and we can provide them different drives for different mappings. So we have some commercial customers in this platform as well, so we can actually have mixed mode experiences. So I have the traditional example of Mary in finance, and there actually literally is a Mary in finance in one of our companies, that she had worked there for years. She didn't want to move to the cloud because she didn't want to open a web page to access the finance files. And she was very efficient at her job, and that's how she had her efficiency. She just double-clicked the finance drive and went in. But other parts of her business wanted to start using external sharing with vendors. So we were able to go mixed mode. We were able to say that these users that we migrate their files to the cloud, they can actually use all of the sharing, and finance can actually have still a mapped network drive. And that's actually worked out really, really well because we can actually cover all of the paradigms of how you get to your cloud storage. But because we could do that as well, we now have some very interesting technology where we can do huge migrations. So for example, there's a migration on the IAM Cloud platform from the University of Minnesota, which is 180,000 Google Apps accounts to Office 365. So because we're powered by Azure, these are the types of things that we couldn't normally do before. So we can actually do cloud-to-cloud migrations now as well. So some institutes fell into some kind of setups where they'd have staff who's migrating into Office 365, but students who's on Office 365 to get access to the Office Pro Plus piece, and they have OneDrive, but they also use another provider for email. But then when people start using collaboration, they discover if you're not in the same tenant, if you're not in the same Office 365 tenant, collaboration can be kind of tricky. So we can actually big bang migrate those people straight over using the platform. So we can actually migrate in multiple directions. But because of that as well, if you're thinking of directory consolidation from an Active Directory responsibilities, we can actually migrate Active Directories as well. Because again, identity is the control plane, so we can do numerous clever things with that. Which brings me on to something which I'm dying to get to, which is this concept of the university for life. So we've seen the user provisioning, we've seen the user deprovisioning cycle, and we've seen touchpoint. But really what we want to come to is, we want to come to this idea where your relationship with your alumni and is driven through their identity. So again, identity as a control plane. Because an awful lot of places now offer lifelong education, library services, email for life, and course content. But when you think about going beyond that, and you think, okay, well, that's all very interesting, but at some point, maybe our institutes will start competing with other online universities. Or if you started signing up deals with the likes of, say, LinkedIn Learning, some of the big learning providers of the world, such as Pluralsight, for example. So as you start signing deals, it's like, could you use those as a perk for alumni? And if so, how do you still keep that alumni engagement? You just mass email how do they go and get access to the services? So what we can do is, because we've retained alumni, is that we can actually become the single sign-on component for those services. So they're retained at your institute with their identities, and they can sign on to different services. I've just picked just random services here. Everybody may have different ideas and things, but even if you can think about the concept of, if you woke up tomorrow and said, do you know what, I want to actually set up an online cloud-powered university. I've got all of these users and I've got all these alumni. How do I connect that up to this new application? And we certainly have an answer for you to that. We go a little bit beyond that, because I know personally I have a lot of accounts, and I graduated from college twice, and I have never signed back into my college account. In fact, I know what my ID is, but I couldn't tell you what a password could be for that account anymore. But what would be ideal for me is, because I still engage with both colleges to sign into alumni services, would be to be able to bring my own ID. So remember we spoke about Touchpoint. So Touchpoint, when someone's signing in, you can say, hey, it's cool, you've graduated. We're going to give you a free month of training on X, and you'll have professional services on Y. Oh, and by the way, could bring an identity that you already have. So somebody can bring their Facebook ID, their LinkedIn ID, their Microsoft ID, and they can actually sign in to the service. They can add that ID to the service. So every time they come back to you, they can actually sign in to their alumni account using what we call a social account. And again, we can reverse that cycle. So if they're partly part-time users that come back to you, we can actually re-provision them into the services back on-premise as well. They could still retain that as a login, but you can mandate they sign in with their student code. So I think I'm okay time-wise. So thanks very much for coming here today, because I think cloud-first approach to identity is crucial for people who are going to adapt a lot of cloud services. And I believe that the partnership that we have between Unity and Cloud can definitely bring back to you guys. So thank you very much for that, and I shall take any and all questions.
First of all, can we round of applause to the work? Any questions for Robert?
Thoughts or comments? Sir?
Just in terms of staff and students, so I go staff and students at the moment, is there anything in Unity and Cloud for that? So,
Can you give me an example?
so for instance, I'm a registered student with UCC, but I'm also a staff member at UCC. So in terms of managing that identity component, is that something that's done in your services?
Yeah, so our platform, I didn't want to go too much into that today, because that's actually a very good question, and it's a complex question and it's a complex answer. But yes, we can actually support either the merging of those identities and the moving of roles, but we are also able to support having two identities. Now, it's a little kind of jarring for a user, because when they come at one of these portals, they'll get asked, are you going to proceed as a staff member or a student member? But we can actually support both. But we find, though, that in a lot of these cases that we'd have to do, there's a lot of identity management project, as Breeding brought up, that has to happen around this. The technology isn't a silver bullet, so we need to be able to determine, can that user have one identity and be in two particular places? Typically, you can do that. Our answer to that at the moment is that we will actually literally give you two identities and link them up as one. That's not a silver bullet either. That comes with its own challenges, but yeah, that's certainly something that we could cater for.
As I say, like the touch point, we can use a login from Facebook, GitHub, or anything. So all my college activities will be shared to them, like Google login will be shared to the Google service of Facebook.
So the way the social logins work is that you have to tie that account to the college account. So we'd only accept the basic amount of information for you. We may take email address. So one of the scenarios we have with a customer is we just take the email address from the social profile as a reset point, so that if they come back and they get confused as to what they logged into last but knew their code, they can actually use their alternate email. We only collect the base level of data. We keep all the rest of the institute's data in the cloud vault, so we don't share that with Facebook or Twitter or anybody else. It's only a bring your own ID scenario is what that is.
Like how it categorizes your searches and everything, how Google does that.
Sorry, repeat again?
So Google does, like, for example, if you're searching for university, like computer science or anything, so you will get many latest searches related to computer science on results or everything?
No, because all you're using it is you're using it as an identity. So when you're logged in, when you're logged into Google, they'll track all that against your identity. But that's really nothing to do with us, because when you present yourself to us, you're just presenting, you're signing in with that ID, and they come back saying, yeah, I signed in with that ID. We go, yep, you link to that ID, and that's fine. We don't pull anything search or any of that related stuff.
Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, we can wrap it up there. So once again, I'd like to thank both of our speakers. Very interesting presentations. We have a 15-minute break now, and we'll resume at 12:00.